looking at Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7 through 12 are all visions that Daniel saw and recorded. So we're going to be looking at the first of those chapters today, chapter 7. In this chapter, Daniel sees a vision of multiple beasts. Each of these beasts represent earthly kingdoms, and God uses this vision to show Daniel a glimpse of what will happen on earth and later on in eternity. So we're just briefly going to go through each of the beasts and what they likely represent. The first beast Daniel sees, he describes it as a lion that has wings like an eagle. This likely represents the Babylonian Empire, and this was actually the empire that was the world power when Daniel saw this vision. You're probably familiar with Nebuchadnezzar, and he was one of the leaders of the Babylonian Empire. The second beast that Daniel sees, it looks more like a bear, and this likely represents the Persian and Mede Empire. Now this empire kind of took place around the same time as the Babylonian Empire, and then we also see that this empire takes over the Babylonian Empire at the end of Daniel chapter 5. The third beast that Daniel sees looks kind of like a leopard and has 4 wings like a bird, also has 4 heads. This one likely represents the Greek Empire during the time of Alexander the Great. And the fourth beast, Daniel describes and says it was terrifying with large iron teeth and 10 horns. One of the horns was boastful and spoke loudly. This likely represents the Roman Empire. So just a few things about these empires. These empires were all big world powers at that time. They encompassed a significant part of the known world at that time. So moving on to verses 9 through 10, this is what Daniel sees after seeing all these beasts. Verse 9, as I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as the snow, and the hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated and the books were opened. So, after Daniel sees the vision of the 4 earthly kingdoms that will come, he sees a scene that kind of resembles a courtroom. The Ancient of Days is a name that's used for God. Daniel describes God here as having clothing white as snow and hair white as wool. His throne was flaming with fire. Have you ever pictured God this way? It's not really how I typically view God. And so we see later that Daniel was pretty disturbed by the whole vision. But just thinking about God this way was probably a lot for Daniel to comprehend. I can't even imagine what he was thinking when he first saw that. But so moving on, Daniel sees the Ancient of Days take his seat on the throne and basically start the court. And this is what he sees in verses 11 through 12. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and his body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts were stripped of their authority but were allowed to live for a period of time. Okay, so just to recap those 2 verses, Daniel continues to watch this court scene unfold, and the 4th beast was destroyed and thrown into the fire. The other beasts had their power and authority taken away. And this represents the end of the earthly power and the end of earthly kingdoms. And then this is where the passage gets really cool in verse 13. In my vision, at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Okay, so what is going on here? Daniel is continuing to watch this vision and kind of this court scene unfold. He sees the Son of Man, and this is a term that is used for Jesus. So he sees the Son of Man coming. The Son of Man approaches the Ancient of Days. Again, that's a terminology used for God in the Bible. And so God takes all the authority away from all of the beasts and all the earthly kingdoms and all those powers and gives it all to Jesus. Jesus is given all authority, glory, and all power. And then in verse 14, it says that all nations and all people worship him. His kingdom lasts forever. So unlike these earthly, temporary powers and kingdoms, Jesus is the ultimate authority. He will have everlasting power and glory and authority. His kingdom will never end. We see a pretty similar passage in Philippians 2, verses 10 through 12. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that in the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. And then every tongue confess that Jesus is Christ the Lord, that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So just a few closing thoughts. But all kingdoms, kings, countries, presidents, political parties, everything is temporary. All of these things seem so important to us right now, but ultimately Jesus will have all authority and only Jesus will have an eternal kingdom. Personally, this passage makes me think a lot about how I'm spending my time and investing my time and like what I am working towards in life. So one thing I think about is, where do I put my security in? If it's anything but Jesus, if it's in my career or my success or even the political party or anything but Jesus, it's something that will let me down, because only Jesus has everlasting authority. Only Jesus has a kingdom that lasts. 2, am I spending my time and life in a way that has eternal impact, or am I living for earthly glory and comfort? I don't want to waste time building my own earthly kingdom and pursuing the things that matter so much on this earth, but don't really make an impact long term, because all those things are temporary. And then 3, how does or how should knowing that Jesus is the ultimate authority, change how I live my everyday life? Okay, guys, that's all I have today. See you.